My name is Alyssa Monroe, and I was 30 years old the morning I graduated. Not 22. Not fresh out of anything. 30. It took me 7 years to finish my degree. 7 years of waking up before sunrise, working full-time, and dragging myself to evening classes with reheated coffee and tired eyes. 7 years of telling myself, just one more semester, while my life stayed on pause. While my friends were getting married, switching careers, traveling, or posting smiling photos from places I'd never been, I was learning how to survive on schedules and discipline. I worked payroll during the day, cleaned offices at night, and studied in between, usually in my car because it was the only quiet place I had. I missed birthdays, skipped holidays, said no to weddings and weekend trips. Not because I didn't want joy, but because I wanted stability. I wanted something no one could take from me. That morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of my small apartment like it was trying to congratulate me. Dust floated in the air. The city outside sounded normal. Cars, sirens, people rushing somewhere, but inside, everything felt suspended. My cap and gown hung from the back of the bedroom door. I'd steamed them the night before, twice. I kept checking them, like they might disappear if I didn't. I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom, smoothing the fabric of my dress, practicing my smile. It felt strange, smiling at myself like that. Proud, almost unfamiliar. This wasn't just a graduation. This was proof. Proof that I wasn't the family disappointment they always assumed I'd be. Proof that taking the long way didn't mean taking the wrong one. Proof that the girl who used to be told, "You should have figured this out by now," actually had. I poured myself coffee, burnt, cheap, exactly how I always drank it, and sat at the tiny kitchen table. I let myself imagine it. My parents sitting in the audience. My mom waving too hard. My dad recording on his phone, blocking someone else's view. I imagined hugs, photos, maybe even pride. We weren't a close family, not really, but I thought this day might be different. Big moments sometimes reset things. That's what people say, anyway. My phone buzzed on the table. I smiled before I even picked it up. "Mom." The message was short. "We're not coming. You know why." That was it. No explanation. No apology. No congratulations. Just one sentence. Sharp and final, like it had been sitting there waiting for the right moment to land. I stared at the screen, rereading it slowly, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves if I looked long enough. They didn't. My chest tightened in a way I recognized immediately, the kind of pressure that comes when you already understand what's happening, but your heart refuses to accept it. I didn't reply. What would I even say? Why? Please. I worked so hard. I set the phone face down and sat there, staring at the wall, my coffee going cold in my hands. You know why? Those 3 words echoed louder than the message itself. I thought back through the years, searching for the reason they meant. The argument we never resolved. The disappointment they never named out loud but made sure I felt. The unspoken rule that my achievements only counted if they made sense to them. I had chosen a degree they didn't respect. A timeline they didn't approve of. A life that didn't include asking them for permission. Maybe that was the why. I got dressed slowly, like I was moving underwater. Every motion felt heavier now, pulling on shoes, pinning my hair, lifting the cap from the chair. I checked my phone again. Nothing. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I didn't need anyone there. I told myself that walking across that stage was still mine, no matter who was watching. Still, when I stepped outside and locked my door, the quiet felt different. Hollow. On the train ride to campus, families filled the seats around me. Parents carrying flowers. Siblings holding phones. Laughter bouncing off the windows. I kept my eyes on my reflection in the glass. You earned this, I told myself. No one can take it. An hour passed. Just as I was standing near the entrance to the ceremony hall, adjusting my tassel, my phone buzzed again. Not a call. A notification. Instagram. I almost ignored it. Almost. But curiosity, no, instinct, made me open it. It was my younger cousin's post. And in that moment, everything I'd been trying to hold together began to crack. I shouldn't have opened the post. I knew that before the image even finished loading, before my brain could catch up with the slow dread spreading through my chest. But I did anyway, because some part of me still believed this was all a misunderstanding. That maybe I'd see something harmless, something unrelated. I was wrong. There they were. My parents, pressed together in the front seats of our old SUV. My aunt in the back. My cousin grinning like it was Christmas morning. Streamers taped crookedly across the windows. Balloons bobbing against the roof. A hand-painted sign stretched across the tailgate. So proud of our grad. Except it wasn't for me. Front and center stood my cousin Jake, holding up his high school certificate like it was a championship trophy. He was 16. Barely old enough to drive. Barely old enough to understand what the word sacrifice even meant. The caption read, "Road trip celebrations are the best kind." My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I might actually fall. They weren't busy. They weren't sick. They weren't stuck. They weren't delayed. They were celebrating. Just not me. I stood there in my cap and gown, surrounded by strangers adjusting their tassels, hugging their families, crying into shoulders that had shown up. The noise around me faded into a dull hum, like I was underwater again. I scrolled. Another photo. Cake on the hood of the car. Another. Group selfie. Everyone smiling. Another. Jake laughing, my mom's hand on his shoulder. The timestamp told me everything I needed to know. They were an hour away. An hour. They could have made it. They chose not to. Something inside me went very still. Not shattered. Not hysterical. Just quiet. I locked my phone and slid it into my bag, afraid of what I might do if I kept looking. Then I walked into the ceremony hall and found my assigned seat. Row G, seat 14. I sat down and folded my hands in my lap, staring straight ahead as names echoed across the room. When people stood to cheer, I clapped politely. When families waved, I smiled faintly. When it was my turn to walk across the stage, I did. The applause was loud enough. The dean shook my hand. Someone took a photo I'd never see. For a brief moment, under the bright lights, I felt weightless. And then it was over. No hugs waiting. No familiar faces scanning the crowd. No one calling my name. I walked back out into the daylight alone. That evening, back in my apartment, I set my cap on the table and stared at it like it belonged to someone else. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the floor, my back against the couch. That's when my phone started buzzing. Missed call. Then another. Then a text. "Dad, why are you being so cold?" I didn't reply. Another message came in. "Mom, we didn't think it would matter this much." I laughed once, quietly. A short sound that surprised even me. Didn't think it would matter. I thought about the years I'd rearranged my life around everyone else's needs. The weekends I'd covered shifts so someone else could rest. The money I'd sent when bills came up short. The way I'd always been the reasonable one, the flexible one, the one who understood. Understanding had cost me everything. I opened my laptop and logged into an account I hadn't touched in months. The Family Support Fund. Years ago, after my aunt lost her job, I'd started it quietly. A shared emergency account. I was the primary contributor. Always had been. Every month, without fail, money went in. College textbooks postponed. New clothes delayed. Savings put on hold. Because family helps family. I stared at the balance for a long time. Then I clicked freeze account. A simple button. One confirmation screen. One final click. Done. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel guilty. I felt finished. The next morning, the fallout began. Calls. Messages. Voicemails layered with confusion and irritation. "Dad, what's going on with the account?" "Aunt, is there a mistake?" "Mom, this isn't like you." I answered one call. Just one. "What's wrong with the account?" my dad asked, skipping any pretense. "Nothing," I said calmly. "I closed it." There was a pause. Then, "You can't do that." "I already did." "You're punishing everyone because we missed your graduation?" I thought of the sign on the SUV. The balloons. The cake. "No," I said. "I'm just done pretending it didn't matter." He sighed, the familiar sound of someone inconvenienced, not remorseful. "You're overreacting." That word again. Overreacting. It landed differently this time. It didn't hurt. It clarified. "I'm reacting appropriately," I said. "You just aren't used to it." I hung up before he could respond. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. And in the quiet, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. The silence lasted exactly 48 hours. That's how long it took for the missing money to speak louder than my missing face at the graduation ceremony. I was standing in the checkout line at a grocery store I usually avoided because it felt like a luxury. Real produce. Name brand cereal. Things I used to put back when my phone buzzed with a family emergency text. My phone vibrated again. Dad calling. I stared at the screen while the cashier scanned my items, my heart steady in a way that felt unfamiliar. For once, I didn't feel the urge to brace myself or prepare an apology. I answered. "What is going on with you?" he demanded. No hello. No warmth. Just accusation. "I graduated," I said simply. A sharp exhale. "What does that have to do with anything?" I almost smiled. "You're right," I replied. "It has nothing to do with you." There was a beat of silence, then his voice hardened. "You're hurting people who didn't do anything wrong." I paid for my groceries and stepped aside, lowering my voice. "I funded that account alone. I don't owe access to anyone. You're being dramatic." That word had followed me my whole life. Dramatic when I asked to be included. Dramatic when I needed help. Dramatic when I finally stopped offering both. "No," I said calmly. "I'm being clear." He scoffed. "You think money gives you power now?" I paused. "No," I said. "I think silence does." I hung up. When I got home, my phone lit up with messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. "Aunt Linda, this is tearing the family apart. Cousin Mike, Jake doesn't understand why you're mad. Mom, we raised you better than this." I stared at the screen, noticing something that hadn't occurred to me before. Not one message asked how graduation felt. Not one said congratulations. Not one apologized. It was all about what they were losing. I typed one reply and sent it to the group chat. Me, I showed up for years. Yesterday I stopped. Then I muted the conversation. The days that followed felt strange, like walking without a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I went to work and focused. I cooked meals instead of grabbing whatever was cheapest. I slept through the night. On the fourth day, my cousin Jake messaged me directly. "Jake, hey, congrats on graduating." I didn't know they weren't going. I stared at the message longer than I expected to. "Me, thanks." That was all I sent. Later that evening, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. I watched through the peephole as she adjusted her purse, smoothed her hair, knocked twice like she had every right to be there. I didn't open the door. She knocked again. Louder. "Alyssa," she called. "We need to talk." I leaned my forehead against the door, breathing slowly. "We've talked enough," I said through the wood. Her voice softened. "Don't be like this." "Like what?" I wondered. "Honest. Finished." "This isn't about the money," she continued. "You're taking things too personally." I almost laughed. "I spent years being impersonal so everyone else could be comfortable," I said. "I'm done." There was a long pause. Then her tone changed. Sharper. "You're being selfish." That word should have stung. It didn't. "I'm being independent," I replied. Her footsteps retreated down the hallway. That night, I opened my laptop and updated my budget. For the first time, my numbers were mine alone. I booked a therapy appointment. I replaced my broken desk chair. Small things, but they felt monumental. A week later, my cousin Jake emailed me. Not to ask for money. Not to complain. Just one sentence. "I didn't know you paid for so much. Thank you." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood something important. Gratitude that arrives only after consequences isn't gratitude. It's shock. 2 weeks after graduation, I got a promotion at work. Nothing flashy. Just recognition. My manager shook my hand and said, "You've always been reliable." Reliable. The word landed differently now. I went home that evening and stood in my kitchen, looking around at the life I'd built quietly without applause. And for the first time, it felt like enough. But the story wasn't finished. Because when you stop playing a role, the people who benefited from it don't disappear quietly. They come knocking. The knock came at 9:32 p.m. Not a polite knock. Not a, "Hey, are you home?" knock. A hard, impatient pounding that assumed I'd answer. I was folding laundry on my couch, the TV murmuring in the background, when I heard it. My body reacted before my mind did, shoulders tensing, stomach tightening. Old instincts. I already knew who it was. My aunt never knocked like that. My dad never showed up unannounced. But my cousin Jake's mother, my Aunt Linda, believed access was a given. I opened the door. She stood there with her arms crossed, jaw tight, keys still in her hand like she might turn around and leave if I said the wrong thing. The hallway light caught the edge of her frustration. "What is going on with you?" she demanded. I leaned against the doorframe, calm. "Good evening to you, too." "This isn't funny," she snapped. "Jake's college prep program just got cut." I nodded slowly. "I'm aware." Her eyes narrowed. "So you admit it?" I never denied it. She stepped closer. "You're punishing a kid because you feel ignored." There it was, the story they'd agreed on. "I didn't punish anyone," I said evenly. "I stopped funding something that was never my responsibility." She scoffed. "Family doesn't work that way." "Exactly," I replied. "That's the problem." She looked past me into my apartment, taking in the neat shelves, the new lamp, the absence of chaos. Something flickered across her face, resentment, maybe. "You think you're better than us now?" she asked. "No," I said. "I think I'm done being smaller." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. The silence stretched between us. "You didn't even tell us," she said finally. I met her gaze. "No one told me you weren't coming to my graduation." Her expression hardened. "That was different." "Was it?" She exhaled sharply. "You're being dramatic." I smiled faintly. "You've already used that one." She shook her head. "You've always taken things too seriously. You make everything about you." I thought of the empty seat in the auditorium, the photo I'd seen online, the sign on the SUV. "I made one day about me," I said quietly. "After 7 years." She looked away. "I don't even know who you are anymore," she muttered. "That makes 2 of us," I said. She left without another word, heels clicking angrily down the hall. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing out slowly. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. 4 years, confrontations like that would have sent me spiraling. Apologizing. Explaining. Over-explaining. This time I felt steady. The family group chat exploded later that night. "Mom, we're worried about you." "Dad, don't forget where you came from." "Linda, this is tearing the family apart." I stared at the messages, noticing the pattern. Worried. Disappointed. Accusatory. Never sorry. I typed one message. "Me. I built my life quietly while you all benefited. I'm not doing that anymore." Then I left the chat. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No calls. No messages. No emergencies. It was unsettling at first, like waking up after a loud noise stops. But as the hours passed, the quiet felt peaceful. I went for a walk. I signed up for a gym near my apartment. I made dinner without checking my phone every 5 minutes. That afternoon, my therapist said something that stuck with me. "You weren't in a family," she said gently. "You were in a system. And systems resist change." I nodded, tears burning my eyes. That evening, my phone buzzed with one final message from my mom. "Mom, we didn't think it would matter this much." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Because if they still didn't understand by now, they never would. And for the first time, I was okay with that. Blocking them wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. I didn't announce it. I didn't write a long explanation or post a quote about boundaries. I simply went into my phone, one contact at a time, and removed the access they'd always assumed they had. Mom, Dad, Aunt Linda, the cousins who only reached out when something was needed. When I finished, my phone felt lighter in my hand, like an object instead of a leash. The first night after blocking them, I barely slept. Not because I missed them, but because my body didn't know how to relax without waiting for the next demand. Years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. I kept waking up, expecting my screen to light up with an emergency. It didn't. By the third night, something shifted. I slept through until morning, deep and uninterrupted. When I woke up, there was no panic in my chest. No mental checklist of who might need what from me that day. Just quiet. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. How tense my shoulders had always been. How often I apologized without meaning to. How my thoughts were usually about everyone else's problems instead of my own life. Therapy helped me put words to it. You were taught that love is earned through usefulness, my therapist said. That's not love. That's conditioning. The word hit hard. Conditioning. I thought about every time I'd been praised. Not for who I was, but for what I provided. Money. Time. Solutions. Stability. No one ever asked what it cost me. A week passed. Then 2. I started cooking real meals, instead of whatever was fastest. I bought groceries without guilt. I replaced my cracked phone screen, instead of telling myself it could wait. Small acts of care felt rebellious. One evening, while I was folding laundry, an email notification popped up. From Jake. I almost deleted it without opening it. Almost. But something about the subject line stopped me. Thank you. I read it slowly. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't mention money. He didn't defend anyone. He just said he hadn't realized how much I'd done behind the scenes. That graduating had inspired him. That he hoped I was okay. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that caring didn't mean sacrificing myself again. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole. My dad. He stood there holding a grocery bag, shifting his weight like a man waiting to be let back into a house he still believed was his. I didn't open the door. He knocked again, softer this time. Alyssa, he called. I just want to talk. I leaned against the door. My voice was steady. I don't. Silence. Then quietly, you're really doing this? Yes, I said. I am. He stood there for another moment, then left the bag on the floor and walked away. I waited until his footsteps faded before opening the door, just long enough to move the bag outside the building. I didn't bring it in. That night I cried. Not because I doubted myself, but because I was grieving the family I'd always hoped they'd become. Grief doesn't always come from loss. Sometimes it comes from clarity. Over the next month, my life expanded in ways I hadn't expected. I signed the lease on a brighter apartment with bigger windows. I started running again, the kind that burns your lungs and clears your head. I accepted a spot in a master's program I'd been too afraid to apply for before. I stopped explaining myself. When coworkers asked about my family, I kept my answer simple. We're not close. And for the first time, that sentence didn't feel like a confession. It felt like truth. But just when I thought the storm had passed, it came back one last time. Because some people don't understand boundaries. They see them as challenges. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The kind of afternoon that used to make me anxious because it left too much room for unexpected calls. But that day I was calm. I had laundry spinning in the washer, soup simmering on the stove, and sunlight pouring through the windows of my new apartment. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed. I listened to it while leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, already knowing who it would be. My mom. Her voice was soft, almost careful, like she was approaching a fragile animal. I don't know why you're shutting us out like this, she said. We're your family. We won't be around forever. There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just fear. I deleted the voicemail. Not out of anger, but because I finally understood that nothing new lived there. That night, I sat in therapy and said something out loud for the first time. I think I was raised to disappear. My therapist nodded. You were raised to support the structure, not to be supported by it. The words settled into me slowly, like truth always does. A week later, I ran into Jake at a coffee shop near campus. He was taller than I remembered, quieter too. He smiled when he saw me, a real one, not the performative kind. Congrats, he said. On everything. Thanks, I replied. We talked for a few minutes. About school. About work. About nothing heavy. When he left, he hugged me briefly and said, I'm trying to do things on my own now. I believed him. That was enough. Months passed. Life didn't magically become perfect, but it became mine. I moved through my days without flinching at notifications. I stopped feeling guilty for resting. I built routines that supported me instead of draining me. I adopted a rescue dog and named her Luna. She followed me from room to room like I mattered just for existing. I fell in love with someone kind. Someone who listened without interrupting. Who never made me feel like affection had to be earned. One evening, as we sat on the couch, he asked about my graduation. I told him everything. When I finished, he didn't defend them. He didn't minimize it. He just said, "I'm proud of you." I cried then. Not because it hurt, but because it healed something I didn't realize was still open. A year after graduation, I framed the only photo I had from that day. Me alone, kept slightly crooked, smiling through exhaustion. I hung it above my desk, not as a reminder of what I lost, but of what I claimed. Because here's the truth they never understood. I didn't walk away because I hated them. I walked away because I finally loved myself enough to stop disappearing. I didn't graduate from college that day. I graduated from guilt, from obligation dressed up as love, from a role that required me to be useful instead of seen. If you're reading this and it feels familiar, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not cruel for choosing peace. You are not broken because the people who raised you couldn't meet you where you were. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't holding on. It's letting go. And when I raise a glass now, quietly in my own space, it isn't for them. It's for the woman who finally showed up for herself.